to This Week in Hearing. I'm Shari Eberts, and this week our guest is Paul Gilbert, a prolific American heavy metal and hard rock guitarist who's highly regarded as one of the best musicians of all time. So thank you for being here. He is widely known as the co-founder of Mr. Big, with its chart-topping worldwide #1 hit single To Be With You, and is a member of Los Angeles-based band Racer X. His music career spans 4 decades and sadly has led to hearing loss from years of loud noise exposure from guitar amplifiers. And he's now a Phonak ambassador, hoping to spread awareness about hearing loss, break down stigmas, and shine a light on the importance of wearing hearing devices. So thank you, Paul, for being here to talk about your music and your hearing loss journey and to share everything that you've learned with our community.
Thanks for having me here, and let's have a good time.
Absolutely. So every person with hearing loss has a story, right? So I was hoping you would share a little bit of yours. When did it start? How has it progressed?
Well, when I think of hearing loss, it was something that did happen gradually. I could hear much better when I was a kid, and it made it much easier to learn language, and I could have a fairly normal existence. And I still remember all the things that I would blame on everyone else except me for things that were actually happening with my own, what turned out to be hearing loss. And so the reason I like the idea that everyone has a story is that I think depending on what frequencies you're missing or what frequencies you have a hard time hearing, that really changes the experience of what you might struggle with. And of course, the extent to which you've lost them. To me, the biggest challenge is language. And I wouldn't have predicted that. When I first, went to an audiologist and had a hearing test and found out that I had significant hearing loss, my first thought was, oh no, I'm a musician. I was only thinking about music.
Right.
It turns out that I can function musically much easier
Hmm.
than, music is relatively easy, thank goodness, but speech is really the challenge. And so, of course, hearing aids are enormously helpful, but also just being aware of the problem. And then, when I speak to other people, I let them know. And then they can be much more helpful. Basically, if in one sentence, if I just say slowly and clearly and face toward me, that solves 75% of everything. But that's challenging for some people because not everybody's, they turn around and they whisper. And, the people I have to train people.
Absolutely, because people don't really understand hearing loss. So even if you say, well, you know what, I have hearing loss, I have trouble hearing you, that might not be enough, right? You need to ask them to do specifically what it is that's helpful to you, right? Like slow down a little bit or face me a little bit or, give specific instructions. And then, like you said, it can really take you a long way.
Yeah, some some people adapt quite quickly, and some people don't, and I have to keep on them if I value communication, or at least two-way communication, because I can talk all day, and hopefully it's relatively normal, but it's getting things back to me that can be the challenge.
Yeah. And that's the risk of hearing loss, right? Is that you feel separated from other people because it does take a little bit more work to communicate. And so that work needs to come from both sides of the equation. And so hopefully if people are important enough to you and you're important enough to them, everyone makes that effort. And over time, it just becomes a natural and easier way to communicate.
Well, that's also important when in terms of self-awareness.
Yes.
Is there's that decision: am I going to retreat, or am I going to do whatever it takes to connect? And because it's harder to connect, and so sometimes you're tired, or it's easy, it can be very tempting to give up. And there are still some situations where you weigh the options, like how much time do I have? How important is this transaction? And at the grocery store, I've memorized the things now, but do you want a receipt?
Right.
The first time they asked that, it took what did you say that again? Can you write it? It took a long time to get it, and now I know they're going to ask it. And
Exactly.
so, that's the sort of thing that a person with hearing loss goes through. And and if it's a familiar situation and you've done it before, then okay, this now's the time they're going to ask me if I want a receipt, and I already know the answer. Um, but if it's a new situation, that can be really stressful because every little thing is hard. And it's made easier with hearing aids. It's made easier with making people aware that you need some extra help. But easier isn't 100% solution. And the way I look at that is nobody has limitless hearing powers or limitless anything. I mean, I play guitar and I've got big hands, and that's helpful. I don't have limitless hands though. My fingers aren't infinitely long. And so, if I have students that have smaller hands or shorter fingers, I'll tell them, some things you may have to work harder for, or may have to figure out a plan B. But it's not like I've got limitless fingers that can just do anything. I've got bigger hands, but I've got struggles too. There's nobody can do everything. So, it's not. That's something that everybody faces.
Yeah. And it's not about making every situation perfect either, right? Because no communication situation is going to be perfect, but it's sort of optimizing it, right? Figuring out how do you take the skills that you have, the information you can share with somebody else, their effort, putting that all together to try and draw, the optimal communication situation. And hearing aids will help, but best practice communication will help. Other types of things factor into it as well.
Yeah, but I think I waited a long time before getting hearing aids, and I even tried them once early on. I don't remember what brand it was. I don't think it wasn't Phonak, but I gave up pretty quickly.
Mm.
And then it took me until there was really no other choice, where the only person I could talk to was my wife, because she had learned what I needed so well. But that was like, it's nice to have the option to have someone else to communicate with besides, her translating everything for me. So at that point, I got hearing aids, and that really opened things up significantly, and gave me a fighting chance to do a whole lot more. And still, every morning, the first thing I do when I get up is put them in, and okay, I've got a fighting chance now. This is great.
Absolutely. Well, let's step back a little bit because it's not every day that I get to meet such a prolific musician, especially one that has hearing loss. So, can you talk a little bit about what drew you to music in the first place and just a little bit about your love for music?
Oh my goodness! Well, my parents had a great record collection,
Mhm.
and I loved. I had favorites. I loved their Beatles albums and the Stones and the Who, and uh, there was great rock and roll on the radio. I heard Led Zeppelin on the radio, and that was really exciting. Uh, so just hearing music and loving it as a fan.
Mhm.
And my uncle was and still is a really good guitar player. And he lived in a different city, so I didn't see him that often. But when he would visit, we had a guitar around the house. Nobody knew how to play it, but my uncle would pick it up, and magic would happen.
Wow.
And I could see that, somehow he can get he can get it to sound as good or better than the record. And so those were always magical moments, and I think, oh, someday I want to do that. Although, really, I didn't really care what instrument it was. I thought if I can sing, if I can play piano, drums, whatever it is, and I ended up playing a little bit of all those instruments, and I'd sing a bit. It just guitar seemed to have the most momentum to it. Maybe physically, or it's easier to practice because drums you're bothering people because it's loud. Uh, as a singer, I didn't have the high range that most rock singers have, so just for various reasons, guitar just I I made quick progress.
Well, I mean, and you just said, you have big hands, so maybe that was helpful as well, just in terms of physically being able to do whatever it is that you needed to do.
I think it helped being a rock guitar player with a blues influence, because as I've done a lot of teaching now. I have an online school, so I get to see so many students and watch their hand positions. And I remember as a kid thinking that classical guitar was probably the most difficult. Uh, but it's a different animal, and actually I think people with smaller hands often can play classical guitar very easily because the hand position is different. It allows them to reach the reach all the way around. Well, if you watch the legends of rock guitar, Jimi Hendrix, Brian May, just about anybody from that late 60s, 70s era, it's people with big hands, their thumbs hanging way over, they're grabbing the whole neck. It's not just like, reaching this way. So they can reach their thumb over and reach the fingers. And I've got a big poster of Jimi Hendrix where, his thumb's over it. And
Right.
that to me has become one of the biggest missions is to get people to get their thumb over, and also dealing with the fact that people with smaller hands might struggle with that, and what the plan B is.
Fascinating. I love that. Um, I played a little guitar when I was in grade school or whatever, but we never got into that level of with specificity or anything. I was never a serious player, just a little bit of fun. So,
Well, fun, any amount of fun is the best. That's the goal.
absolutely. So, when I think about music and I think about hearing, I feel like good hearing would be really important in terms of being able to compose and play music. Now, you said at the beginning that you had less of an issue with music, but do you feel like it's impacted your music career at all, or not so much?
It's it's changed the way as a listener, it's changed what I focus on. Because as a kid, when my hearing was pretty good, I would really enjoy the texture of music. Just the sound of a voice or of a guitar or cymbals would be really appealing to me. And sometimes I would listen to music just as the text so nice. I found as time went on, I became less interested in the texture because it was harder for me to hear it, and I became more interested in the melodies and the harmony behind it and the rhythms. So it was more the bones of the music.
Right, right. No, that makes a lot of sense. So when you're playing today, when you're performing, do you let all the other musicians know about your hearing loss and, how do they react to that? And are there ways that they can help you or, how do you make that work?
Well, the first person I'll talk to is the drummer because the drummer has a drum set that has a lot of different sounds. Some of those sounds I hear very easily. The kick drum, no problem. The snare drum, it's very percussive, no problem. Cymbals, that's a problem.
Mm.
so so I'll tell the drummer, as long as the kick drum and the snare are going, I'm going to be locked in. No problem. So if that stops and there's a section of the song where you're keeping time with only the hi hat or the cymbals, I'm going to have to turn around and look. And if I can't because I'm singing, then my apologies. You're going to have to follow me.
Wow.
So there's a Mr. Big song that happens a lot. It's called Green Tinted 60s Mind. And it's got this guitar intro where it's just guitar and hi-hat. So it's that's where the trouble is bound to happen.
Okay.
And I always tell the drummer in those sections, just listen to me. I apologize if I speed up or slow down, but even if I'm wrong, I'm right. You have to follow me there. And fortunately, my meter tends to be pretty good, so the drummer doesn't get too angry, and there's been no arguments. Everybody's all right.
Good, good. I mean, do you ever think about like getting a rear view mirror or something so you can kind of glance behind
I've,
you?
I've, I've tried all kinds of things. I tried having a video camera and a TV monitor.
Yeah.
It's the best thing is having the conversation, and if I'm not singing, I can turn around and look.
No, I love that. I love how open you are about your hearing loss and sort of being out here as an ambassador to talk about that. I know when I first discovered mine, I was very stigmatized by it, and it was really hard for me to sort of overcome that so that I could tell people about it and start to advocate for myself. But did you feel that way ever about your hearing loss, that stigma, or and if you did, how'd you handle that?
I think when I first had hearing aids, I was I was worried that everyone would see them. even though they really were pretty well hidden, the main microphone part is behind the ear, the other part's inside the ear. All there is a tiny little clear wire, and but I was really self-conscious about it. Of course, no one noticed, but I found myself for the first week or two, I would point it out to people. I would say like, you may have noticed there's this, and because I didn't want them to I don't know, make up their own story about it, and so I would just sort of announce it beforehand, like, if in case you're wondering, and then I started to realize no one knows or cares. they, they just want to get to whatever it is. Let's get down to business. Let's play. Let's talk. So they, it wasn't. It was much more something that was going on in my head, and when I realized that everybody was fine, I forgot about it, and I don't really, I certainly don't mention the hearing aids. If anything, actually, once in a while, I'll pull one out and show people if to really let them know, I really do need help. Especially if it's like, you're at like passport control.
Yeah.
Something with this like, heavy stakes, like getting into the country or not. And the person's, the passport control in it's a foreign language, international flight, and the person's questioning you, and they're getting mad at you because how many days have you been outside the country, and you didn't quite hear it, and you're like, I'm really sorry, and I'll take it out and show them, just to say like, I'm not making this up.
I love that. I think that's a good strategy, actually, because sometimes you say, oh, well, I can't hear very well, and people just discount it, right? But if you sort of show them the hearing aid, maybe they'll take it a little bit more seriously.
Yeah.
So,
Well, if you break your leg and you've got crutches, people will open the door for you. But it's not a, they don't really, they won't see the hearing aid, and sometimes they don't really know they don't. A lot of times people don't understand that slowing down and speaking clearly is more effective than speaking loudly. Because
absolutely.
loud is just sort of like, ouch, because you've already got hearing aids, so it's that much louder. So
Well, and a lot of time, that's totally great thing to say. And I think we do have to explain that to people because also if you're shouting, your whole mouth looks different and your face looks different. So it's
yeah,
hard to do speech reading, right? Which we all do a little bit naturally anyway. So you're getting sort of mixed messages if someone is speaking super loudly versus slowing it down a little bit and just that clarity is really what we're looking for
yeah,
even more so than the volume, right? It has to be a certain volume, but
yeah.
once it hits that certain volume, it's really sort of that clarity that can make all the difference.
It's funny because being in the entertainment industry, I do deal with people that are professional public speakers,
Mhm.
or they're singers or they're broadcasters, and my hearing loss disappears. So I'll think like, well, this person is so easy to understand. That's because they're broadcasting. They're used to speaking in front of hundreds of people, or on television or radio, and they're professional communicators. But not everyone is, and it's a good skill.
It is a good skill. Some people say, it's a lost skill, right? But it's something that, when you have hearing loss, it's really important to seek out those people who can still use those communication
Yeah.
skills and then also know what they are so that you can ask people to try and do that and then model it yourself so that, they're not doing all the work. Everybody is contributing to the
And
conversation.
I remember one of the funniest sort of unfortunate combinations. I was doing a guitar camp. A lot of people were there, and one guy showed up. He was actually a student of mine on my online school, so I had a lot of experience teaching him. But he had never. We teach via pre-recorded videos, so a lot of times no speech is necessary. If he just plays the assignment, I don't need any talking. So this is the first time I'd met him in person, and the first time I'd heard him speak. Turns out he has a stutter. And it's really kind of funny combination because you know he has a really hard time getting something out. I have a hard time hearing. And it was like, it was sort of a, and finally he got the thing out, and I went, I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Oh my gosh,
We
right.
both fell on the ground laughing, just like, well, this is funny,
Well,
sometimes,
I mean, and a lot of it's sort of the attitude that you take about it, right? Because like hearing loss can be very funny. And sometimes like if you're just so worried about it or just so self-conscious about it, and you don't allow that to sort of like these mishaps or these mishears
yeah,
to be funny, we
yeah.
can internalize
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
And
It's funny unless you're trying to get through customs in Germany,
well,
and
right, but then you take the hearing out.
after a long flight.
That's right. But I think if we can have sort of a more relaxed attitude about it, other people do as well. So, that's an
Yeah.
important part, I think, of self-advocacy. So I wanted to ask you, because a lot of my friends with hearing loss, they might love music, but they tell me that they have a hard time enjoying it or continuing to enjoy it in the same way that they did. So how did you sort of adapt to that? Did you find the right devices for you, or what other tricks do you use or advice do you have so people can continue to enjoy music even with hearing loss?
Oh, a bunch of things. Well, initially, uh, when you get hearing aids for the first time, your audiologist will tell you it's going to take some time to get used to them. It's different, and the same thing was true with listening to music. I put them in, it's like, oh, this is different. I don't know, and so there's just, you kind of have to have faith. And my first audiologist was great because he said you need a lot of volume from your hearing aids. That's what you need for speech. And he said, I'm not going to give you all that in one mighty swoop, because it's going to be too, you're not it's going to be too difficult to get used to
Overwhelming.
just at once. So he said, I'm going to give you about half what you need, spend about a week with that, and then come back in, and I'll give you the other half. And that worked out so well. And that was why. So if you're people out there, if you're considering seeing an audiologist, if they don't recommend, to ask them about it, because to me that really made a big difference. Gradually getting used to it. And once I did that, the hearing aids really made it easier, because like suddenly I could hear a lot of the high end stuff that had been missing. Besides that, I think different styles of production in recorded music uh, make a difference. I tend to listen to much more sparse production. So if it's an old blues recording and it's just an acoustic guitar and a singer, that sounds pretty good. But if it's a late '80s production where there's reverb on everything and a ton of overdubs, and it's this dense, really densely and compressed modern recording, that can turn into mush, much more easily.
Mhm.
So, you know, check out who's the Big Bill Brunsey. Who's Eric Clapton's favorite old blues singer, who stomps on the ground, plays acoustic guitar, and sings, and that's wonderful stuff. I found with classical music, I love the oboe, because it's got a nice clear mid-range sound, where I'm much more likely to listen to that than violin. So I sort of choose my instruments
Oh,
wisely.
wisely. Yeah,
Yeah.
interesting.
And piano, I know when my wife plays piano, and as soon as she gets up into the top quarter, I'm like, ouch. So if I listen to piano, I like it to be in the lower register. And even with my own playing, I found if I start getting up high, I'm like, no, 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 don't go up there.
No, that's smart. So, I mean, it just having that understanding, even of your own hearing loss, right? And like what's going to sound normal or better, or what's going to sound worse, can help you sort of navigate that, right? And make good choices so that you can have that enjoyment of music. Maybe not every piece of it, but make the choices so that you can enjoy what you're hearing.
Yeah. One other thing. I mean, this is sort of takes some doing, but it really is effective. Um, I don't know if you can see them, but I've got these acoustic panels all over my studio.
Mm.
They, they're there's a company called I mean, a lot of companies make them, but I like a company called GIK because they're relatively inexpensive, and they're the same material as the expensive. The expensive ones are just the corners are slicker,
Okay.
but the functionality, the GIK ones are fine. They're 4 feet by 2 feet. You hang them on the wall like a picture frame, and don't worry about, I've got to have it exactly here with some equation. Just put them everywhere, you know, and it makes a huge difference. It's funny doing podcasts like this. I can always tell when the person I'm talking to is in an untreated room, because their voice is much more difficult to hear because of the reflections, the acoustic
Interesting.
reflections inside the room. It's an echoey room, and the reverb's not friendly. And my room is dead. You clap, and it's just nothing. There's no reflections. And especially since I'm always recording music and playing music, this is like audio heaven. I just love it. And so, and of course, one way, if you go to an audiologist for a hearing test, as soon as you go in that booth, that's a really radical version of that, where it's just really acoustically dead. It's a little, I mean, I don't have it that dead, so but a little bit in that direction is really helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I wish like restaurants would have them and public spaces
Oh,
would have them. I mean, wouldn't that just solve so many problems? Not just for people with hearing loss, for everyone, right? I think
yeah.
everyone would find that to be beneficial. So, note to the architects, include that up front in any new buildings
Yeah,
and restaurants and things like that. So,
absolutely.
yeah. So I guess you are a Phonak ambassador now. So can you talk a little bit about what got you started with that and what's your goal for being an ambassador?
Well, I think my first connection to Phonak was two things. One was I had done a tour. Mr. Big was the support band for Bryan Adams for a while, and he's a supporter of hearing health and awareness, and he was connected with Phonak. So he got me in touch with someone there, and at that same time, uh, Sterling Ball, who at the time was the head of the Ernie Ball uh, company that makes guitar strings and that I endorse. He has hearing loss. He found out that I did too, and he already got Phonak hearing aids, and he called me up, and he's one of those powerful managerial types. Super nice guy. I love him, but he's like, Paul, you got to get these. They changed my life. And when Sterling Ball's yelling at you, you listen. and so and so I thought, okay, well, Sterling said I should do it. He's smart and powerful, and suddenly I have this connection to the company that he recommended. So this is great. This is perfect. So I was able to get a set to try, love them, and sort of just kept in touch with the company over the years, and then more, the people that I was connecting with changed, and finally, the most recent team of people asked me to be an ambassador, and I didn't know. I mean, I've been endorsed musical companies before. I've been working with Ibanez Guitars for decades, and Ernie Ball, the string company, DeMarzio Pick. I mean, there's a long list. So this is really well, maybe the one non-musical company I endorsed was Makita Drills. We used to play
Oh,
we used to play guitar with drills,
interesting.
and so Phonak is my other. Well, in a way, I was going to say non-musical, but really, in a way, it's ultra musical because music is about hearing. So, I'm honored to add them to the list, and it hopefully help some people who. That's one thing. Back to everyone's journey. Of the people that I know that have hearing loss, which of course a lot of rock musicians do, I don't know anyone who's worse than me. Like I have the most severe hearing loss of any musician I've met.
Wow.
And so the thing with hearing aids is, if you're better off than me, they're going to help you even more. So I always think that, you don't have, like, I waited until there was no other choice. But I wish that I would have started earlier, because it would have made life easier along the whole path. So even if you don't necessarily, if you got to that point where it's like, I have to do it, there's no other way. look into it because you know, life will get easier and better.
I love that. Well, as we're sort of wrapping up here, I don't know if there's just any other final pieces of advice you have for other musicians with hearing loss or just in general people with hearing loss. I would love to hear sort of
Yeah.
your final
Well,
thoughts.
of course, you know, when if you're in the audience seeing a loud musical performance, or if you're a musician, yeah, there's different kinds of hearing protection. You know, I mean, if you just get a pair of foam earplugs just to get you through the night, do it. You know, I've used those a lot. But if you go to your audiologist, they can make you a set of custom molds and make those into earplugs. And there are varying degrees of how much they'll cut out. You know, I've got all kinds of sets of those. And I really, for me, I really prefer those to the in-ear monitors because the in-ear monitors, it's all like wearing, I mean, they might block out some stage noise, but for me, not that well. They actually, sometimes the seal doesn't seal as it would. So I just tend to, you know, just protect. And what I need will get in. I can still feel that kick drum, so it's all right.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Paul, for being on our podcast today, sharing your experiences. And I just really enjoyed it. And I wish you continued success in your music and with your hearing loss journey.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, too. And have a great rest of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want to learn more about you, I guess visit paulgilbert.com.
That and my Instagram, I think it's Paul. There's an underscore in there somewhere. It's Paul Gilbert Official. I can't remember where the underscore is. Just
All right, well,
type,
we'll pick it up on the screen.
type in my name on Instagram. It'll come up.
Outstanding. Thank you so much, Paul.
Thank you. All right. Bye-bye.